My name is Laura Bennett, and the moment my daughter ripped my phone out of my hands and slammed it onto the floor, something inside me didn't break. It went quiet. That silence was more frightening than anger, because anger still means you believe you matter. Silence means you are already halfway gone. I didn't scream at her. I didn't chase her down the hallway. I didn't even bend to pick up the shattered phone at my feet. I just stood there, barefoot on the kitchen tiles, staring at the pieces of glass like they were evidence of a truth I had been avoiding for years. That phone wasn't just a device. It was my last connection to a world that existed outside of my role as mom. And my daughter knew it. Emily was 17, tall, sharp-tongued, and permanently annoyed by my presence. Everything about me irritated her. The way I asked questions. The way I worried. The way I existed too loudly in a house where my job was supposed to be invisible. The argument started the way most of them did. Small. I had asked her to lower her voice during a phone call because it was late and her father was already asleep. She rolled her eyes. I insisted. She snapped. "You're always controlling everything," she shouted. I told her I wasn't trying to control her, just asking for basic respect. That was when she crossed the room, grabbed my phone mid-sentence, and hurled it to the ground. The sound was sharp and final. "You don't deserve privacy," she said. "You're just my mom." Her words landed harder than the broken glass. Just my mom. Like that was all I had ever been. Like that was all I was allowed to be. My husband, David, appeared in the doorway seconds later. He looked at the phone on the floor, then at Emily, then at me. "Emily," he said weakly, "that's not okay." She shrugged. "She started it." He sighed, the kind of tired sigh that always ended conversations instead of resolving them. "Laura," he said to me, "can we not escalate this tonight?" And just like that, it was over. No apology. No consequence. No acknowledgement that something deeply wrong had just happened. Emily stormed off to her room, slamming the door. David followed, telling her she needed to calm down. I was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by silence and broken glass, wondering when exactly I had lost the right to be defended in my own home. I cleaned up the phone myself. I swept the pieces into a dustpan and threw them away like trash. That felt appropriate. Later that night, lying in bed next to David, I stared at the ceiling while he slept soundly beside me. I thought about how often I had swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. How many times I had told myself, "She's just a teenager," or "This phase will pass," or "I don't want to make things worse." I had been shrinking for years without realizing it. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet. I made coffee out of habit, then stopped halfway through pouring it, realizing I didn't actually want it. I didn't want anything familiar. I stood at the kitchen counter and looked around the room I had cleaned, cooked, and lived in for nearly 2 decades. Family photos lined the walls. Birthday parties. School plays. Smiling versions of myself that no longer existed. I went upstairs and opened my closet. My clothes were practical. Comfortable. Forgettable. I pulled out a small suitcase from the back and placed it on the bed. I wasn't running away. I wasn't making a dramatic statement. I was reclaiming oxygen. I packed slowly. Not everything. Just enough. Jeans. A sweater. My passport. A little cash I had saved quietly over the years. I wrote no note. There was nothing left to explain. By the time Emily came down for breakfast, I was gone. David would wake up to an empty bed and assume I was upset. He would think I needed time. He would not yet understand that I had reached the end of something much larger than an argument. When I stepped outside, the morning air felt colder than I expected, but cleaner. I got into my car and sat there for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding. I wasn't sure where I was going yet. I just knew I couldn't stay. Because the truth was, my daughter hadn't made me disappear that night. She had only said out loud what everyone else had already decided. That I was a function. A background presence. A woman whose needs were optional. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once in the rearview mirror at the house that had taken everything from me except my name. I didn't know how long I would be gone. I didn't know what would happen when they realized I wasn't coming back that night. But for the first time in years, the silence inside me felt like space instead of absence. And that was enough to keep driving. I didn't turn my phone back on. There was nothing to turn on anyway, just a cracked shell sitting in a trash can somewhere behind my old house. I drove until the familiar streets gave way to highways I had only ever passed through on the way to somewhere else. By mid-morning, I checked into a small roadside motel with faded curtains and a humming air conditioner that sounded like breathing. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't romantic. But it was anonymous, and anonymity felt like mercy. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No rides. No explanations. No emotional labor disguised as motherhood. I stared at my hands and realized they were still shaking. Not from fear, but from release. Meanwhile, back at the house, my absence landed softly at first. David woke up alone and assumed I was already downstairs, making breakfast like I always did. He showered, dressed, checked his email. Only when he walked into the kitchen and saw the empty counter did he pause. No coffee brewing. No note. No sound. He called my name once, casually. Then again, louder. Emily came downstairs, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone. "Where's Mom?" David asked. She shrugged. Probably being dramatic. He frowned. She didn't make breakfast. Emily rolled her eyes. "So make it yourself." That was the first crack. By noon, David had called my phone 6 times. Straight to voicemail. By evening, he was pacing the living room, anxiety creeping into his voice as he left messages that shifted from irritated to concerned. "Laura, this isn't funny. Call me back." Emily stayed in her room, annoyed more than worried. She told herself I was punishing her, that I'd come back once I cooled off. That belief made it easier not to feel guilty. That night, I sat on the motel bed eating takeout and watching a local news channel with the volume low. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that only comes when your nervous system finally stops bracing for impact. The next morning, I bought a cheap phone with cash. A new number. No contacts. I called one person. My sister, Hannah. She answered on the second ring, my name barely out of her mouth before I started crying. Real crying. The kind I had been holding back for years. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The phone. Emily's words. David's silence. When I finished, she said something simple that changed the weight of my decision. "You didn't abandon them," she said. "You stopped abandoning yourself." Over the next few days, the house unraveled in small, telling ways. David had to call into work because he forgot Emily's schedule. He burned dinner twice. He realized he didn't know where I kept the insurance documents or the login for the school portal. These were things he had never bothered to learn because I was always there. Emily missed the bus one morning and exploded when no one drove her. She slammed doors, yelled into empty rooms, complained loudly that everything was falling apart. For the first time, there was no one to absorb her anger and turn it into silence. By the 4th day, Emily searched my room. She expected to find a suitcase half-packed, a note tucked into a drawer. She found neither. What she found instead was space. Closets not recently opened. Ein Nightstand unter Ort. The realization that I hadn't stormed out. I had left deliberately. That night, she asked David a question that stopped him cold. What if she doesn't come back? He didn't answer right away. Because the truth terrified him too. On the 5th day, I left the motel and drove farther. I rented a small furnished studio for a month using a debit card David didn't know existed. I had opened it years ago with birthday money and small freelance earnings, telling myself it was just in case. I didn't know what the case would be back then. I know now. I walked the neighborhood in the evenings, learning the rhythm of streets that didn't know me as a mother or a wife. I was just Laura. A woman buying groceries. A woman sitting alone on a park bench. A woman allowed to exist without explanation. Back home, panic finally set in. David called Hannah, his voice strained. "She just left," he said. She didn't even tell me. Hannah let the silence stretch before replying. You didn't notice she was leaving long before that. Emily overheard the call and felt something twist in her chest. For the first time, anger gave way to fear. Real fear. The kind that makes you question your certainty. She replayed the moment in the kitchen, the sound of the phone hitting the floor, the way I hadn't yelled back. She remembered my face. Not angry. Empty. That image followed her into sleep. On the 7th day, David finally said the words he had been avoiding. We failed her. Emily snapped back instinctively, she failed us by leaving. But the words didn't feel as solid as they used to. They felt defensive. Thin. That night, Emily picked up her phone and typed a message she didn't send. I'm sorry. She stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Apologies are hard when you're not sure they'll be accepted. I spent that same night sitting on my bed, staring at the new phone in my hand. It had been buzzing on and off for days with unknown numbers I refused to answer. I wasn't ready. Disappearing wasn't about punishing them. It was about listening to myself for the first time in decades. And the more distance I put between who I had been and who I was becoming, the clearer something became. I could not go back to the way things were. Whatever happened next, whatever conversations awaited, would have to be different. Because being found only mattered if I was willing to be seen. By the 10th day, the silence around my disappearance had changed shape. It was no longer sharp with panic or anger. It had become heavy, reflective, the kind of quiet that forces people to sit with themselves. I felt it even from miles away. I woke up one morning in the small studio apartment I had rented and realized something unexpected. I missed them, but I did not miss who I had been with them. That distinction mattered. I took my time that day. I made breakfast slowly, sitting at the tiny table by the window, watching strangers pass without knowing my story. I wrote in a notebook I had bought on a whim, filling pages with thoughts I had never allowed myself to finish before. I wasn't planning a dramatic return. I wasn't rehearsing speeches. I was deciding what kind of presence I would be if I went back at all. Back home, the house had stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like a mirror. David had taken time off work. He cleaned, not efficiently, not well, but earnestly. Each misplaced item reminded him of how much he had relied on me without acknowledging it. Emily had grown quieter. She stopped blasting music. She stopped slamming doors. Her friends noticed the change before anyone else did. When they asked where her mom was, she shrugged and said, I don't know, and for the first time, the words scared her. One afternoon, she found the trash can in the garage and saw the shattered remains of my phone at the bottom. She crouched there longer than necessary, picking up a cracked piece of glass, remembering the sound it made when it hit the floor. She remembered what she had said. You don't deserve privacy. You're just my mom. The words felt uglier now that there was no one left to absorb them. That night, she cried alone in her room, not because she missed what I did for her, but because she missed the way I looked at her before resentment hardened her voice. On the 14th day, David finally did something different. Instead of calling and leaving messages that asked me to come back, he left one that didn't ask for anything. Laura, he said quietly, I don't know if you'll ever listen to this, but I need you to know something. I see it now. I saw it too late, but I see it. If you come back, it will not be the same. And if you don't, I will still carry this with me. I listened to that message twice. Then I sat very still. The next morning, I drove back toward the house, not with certainty, but with boundaries. I parked down the street and sat in the car, watching the familiar shape of the place that had once defined me. My hands were steady this time. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. When David opened it, his face collapsed into relief and something like shame. He didn't reach for me. He stepped aside. She's upstairs, he said. Take your time. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I didn't think you'd come back. Her voice was small, stripped of attitude. I nodded. Neither did I. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I didn't mean it. I didn't think you'd really leave. I looked at her carefully, At the child she still was beneath the sharp edges. "I know," I said. "But you did mean the disrespect. And that has consequences." She nodded again, tears slipping down her face. "I know," she whispered. We sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. Not arguing. Not justifying. Talking. Real talking. I told them what it felt like to be erased slowly. To be needed but never considered. To have my dignity treated as optional. David listened without interrupting. Emily listened without defending herself. When I finished, I said the hardest part out loud. I can be your mother and still have boundaries. I can love you and refuse to be treated like I don't exist. The house felt different after that conversation. Not healed. Not perfect. But honest. I did not move back in that day. I told them I needed time and space to decide what my life would look like next.
Emily hugged me carefully, like someone relearning how to touch something fragile.
David nodded, understanding for once that love without effort is just expectation. I drove away again, but this time, it didn't feel like disappearing. It felt like choosing. In the weeks that followed, I stayed connected on my terms. Short visits.
Honest conversations.
Therapy appointments scheduled without me having to beg. Emily learned that anger is not permission. David learned that silence is not peace. And I learned something I want you to hear if you're listening to this story. You do not have to disappear forever to be seen. Sometimes you just have to step away long enough for people to realize the shape of the space you filled. Thank you for staying with my story. If it resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments.
Have you ever felt invisible in your own family?
Like this video if you believe love should never cost you your dignity. Subscribe for more cinematic stories about boundaries, self-respect, and the quiet strength it takes to choose yourself when no one else will.